Hi, Tulsa, and happy graduation week to our Tulsa Public Schools class of 2020. We have celebrated the Webster Warriors, the East Central Cardinals, and we did those on Tuesday. And then we had Booker T. Washington, Rogers, and Central yesterday evening. And today we're going to be recognizing the Hale, McLean, and Memorial High School classes of 2020. So we're super excited. And then we'll close out graduation week tomorrow. Tomorrow we have Phoenix Rising, Tulsa Learning Academy, Edison Preparatory, and Tulsa Met. So it's been an unusual week, and as we've acknowledged over and over, it's not the graduation week that anyone was expecting or the senior year that anyone was expecting. But with that said, our school teams have done an unbelievable job, and our families are celebrating. And for the graduates, it's not the same, but it is also still a very powerful experience for them, and getting to see them, they're just the same experiences that we have at other graduations, where you have some students are crying, some students are laughing, some are just shaking as they take their diploma cover. So it's meaningful. It's really meaningful, and I'm so grateful to our teams and to the committee who helped us come up with the structure that we're using. So it's really, really great. We have a lot of pictures that we're posting on social media, so make sure and take a look at those. They're on my Facebook page. They're also on the Tulsa Public Schools Facebook page. So our school year wrapped up on May 15th. Graduations are wrapping up tomorrow. If you haven't already, you are probably thinking about next year, and you're wondering what it's going to be like for our students and team members to come back to school safely. And I want to make sure that you know that we're thinking about it too. In fact, we're thinking about it pretty much all the time. We're doing a lot of research. We're talking to colleagues all across the country. So what we do know for sure is that COVID-19 is not going away. And we do not anticipate, although it would be amazing to be wrong about this, we don't anticipate having a vaccine or a treatment that's broad enough for us to see a change in the possibility of our next year's school year looking different. And so we'll almost surely have to have some kind of distance learning in place, at least to have in the event that we have a school closure, a family has to self-quarantine, or if we have a community spread and public health officials tell us too that we need to go back to this system-wide. So here are some things that we know for sure that I can commit to you. And the first is that our absolute first priority in all of our planning is to keep our students and our team members safe and healthy. And that is what we're going to do. And so we have used protocols and guidelines from Tulsa Health Department, as well as from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, to plan. We also, though, are focused on wellness as our next priority. This is a collective trauma that our community is going through. And for some families and some individuals, it's even more traumatic than for others, but for everyone, it's a massive disruption. And that has an effect on people's emotional well-being and mental health. And so we are going to make sure that we're paying attention to that. Wellness also means that we are going to continue serving our community and making sure their nutrition is strong. So our summer cafes opened, and we also have our wellness care line. We launched that in April, and we're going to continue operating that over the summer as well. And that care line connects people to mental health support, social services, and then resources for meals and groceries if they need those, in addition to what we're providing, of course. All of this is available on our website, which is tulsaschools.org, and we're updating that regularly, and really encourage you to take a look at that. So we also know that we're going to have to support our teachers and other educators in preparing for this changing landscape. We're going to have strong distance learning practices, given the likelihood that we'll have to have some form of distance learning in the fall. And we know that relationships have to be built, and we're going to figure out how to do that well. We also know that we need to have strong content for our teachers to use that is available on our platforms. We're also committed to keeping our students having access to grade level learning and rigorous instruction. So while this is a massive disruption, our students need and deserve access to the kind of learning experiences that are going to help continue to keep them moving on their preparedness for college and career. And then we also know we have to support our families. So this is, I believe, a really positive thing that could come out of all of this is just really new, renewed relationships with our families and with community-based organizations. Families want their kids back in school, first and foremost, both because school is, the experience of school is more than just the content and the instruction, but also because they need that for their own lives and their own responsibilities. So we want to support our families, though, because we know that distance learning is going to likely be some kind of a reality, as I've talked about. So in our last video, I mentioned that it'd be nice to bring in a special guest to share some information about, well, I want to bring in special guests during all of these to highlight a deeper amount of information. Today, I've asked our Chief Operations Officer, Jorge Robles, to come because I want to focus on health and safety, because those are our greatest priorities and we want to keep those in mind. And I want you to know who he is and to get a chance to hear from him. Hi, Jorge.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. We want to talk about health and safety when we return to August, to school in August or whenever we return. We're working on schedules right now. So thank you for joining us.
I'm happy to be here.
So I know some people know you really well, and you were on our last call briefly, but can you remind folks who may be watching who don't know who you are and what your role is in our district?
Absolutely, happy to. I was actually born in Santiago, Chile. Been in the States for my adult life. I've served many years in K-12 public education. Have a lot of experience in operations and strategy, both in public education as well as in the private sector. And I'm a proud father of two TPS students. So all this work is professionally very meaningful, but also personally very important to me, as my kids are part of the TPS family. And in my role in operations, I oversee a number of departments, including transportation, facilities, child nutrition, emergency and risk management, campus police, print services. So really a lot of teams that are, at the core of the challenges that we're facing to provide support to our students and families now and as we look at next year.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thank you. I'm so grateful to have you on our team. And for those of you who don't know Jorge, just know that we are very, very fortunate to have him and his whole family in Tulsa and a part of our community and a part of our team. So let's start with just generally safety and health in our buildings. And what people may not realize is how much we do during regular years, during, pre-COVID, because we have illnesses we're beating back all the time, just including the flu. So can you talk a little bit about what we do and what we've always done?
Absolutely. So you're right to say that we do have a lot of safety and hygiene practices that helped us every year combat outbreaks of flu, and have preventative practices. So we constantly disinfect our buildings. They're cleaned every day to make sure that surface areas and common areas are kept clean. We have the same practices with our buses, where they're disinfected as well in between routes and overnight. to make sure that any space that kids occupied are safe and sanitized. We have protocols and plans to handle emergencies where we have, whether it's a flu outbreak, and do the appropriate treatment and have responses, as well as having ways to, treat different, whether it's the flu or bugs or any situation that is happening at the school. We also train our teams, every year on safety and health practices, and we make sure that they also are well equipped with knowledge and the gear and the equipment to do that. Across the teams, we also are staying updated on the products that are more effective to treat the different things that we might be seeing in a school. So we're changing the type of products that we purchase, knowing based on research what's effective, what's not. So we make those changes accordingly. And then we do a number of maintenance practices that have to do with, the quality of the air, ventilation, making sure that our ventilation systems are well in good condition, etc.
Mm-hmm. And you kind of touched on this, but we have, the disinfectants that we use are the hospital grade. We're making sure that they're the right ones that are listed from the CDC as far as being the kind that will kill the coronavirus. And then biosprays. I don't think you talked about that. We do have the biospray technology.
Yes. We do have the capability of applying this treatment that's called biospray that essentially eliminates any kind of virus from surfaces, etc. So it's like a fumigation, but with a product that actually stays and treats the surfaces for a longer period of time. That is, safe for any type of allergies, etc. So whenever we either proactively or in abundance of caution, we want to make sure that we go above and beyond what the current practices are. We go and biospray. So since COVID started, we've been doing that periodically at all of our schools. And in normal times, we use that when we have emergencies.
So a lot of people, I probably didn't realize that in our emergency operations plan that we had a section on dealing with the pandemic. But that obviously, and it was very helpful to us in the spring, but doesn't really get to the level of depth of what we need for what we are anticipating for the fall. So can you talk a little bit about, we've been working so much on this, can you talk a little bit about some of the health and safety considerations that we are keeping front of mind as we prepare for next year?
Absolutely. As you know, this is a very complex topic as we're trying to process a lot of information. But there's some core things that we're already actively working on and thinking about all the things that we need to have plans for. And as we consult and continue to look at research and with our the strong partnerships that we have with Tulsa Health Department and looking at CDC guidance, make sure that we're informing the way that we're thinking about these plans for next year. So we know that we have to do, and we're doing a lot of thinking around preparing our school facilities. Sort of what do entries and exits look like? What is the ventilation system? How does it need to change or be enhanced? Signage, for social distancing, and overall just a plan and a way to support intensifying our cleaning, disinfectation, and ventilation to make sure that the facility overall is ready and keeps everyone in it healthy. There's a whole category around social distancing that is perhaps the most complex one to figure out how we're going to adapt to this. because we know that based on the guidance, we want to observe social distancing to keep our kids and teachers and staff safe. So we're thinking about, what do classroom configurations need to look like to keep appropriate spacing among desks? What does the common area utilization looks like to observe social distancing? Obviously, something that we have already been doing around modifying our meal services. We've been doing this grab and go and delivery through buses while kids are not in school. We're probably going to need to have a different system when we're able to have kids in school, where maybe the meals are, they're going to have to be prepackaged in individual containers, have a different way to deliver, so there is no large gatherings. Maybe there's a constant way to provide meals to kids. So we're thinking about options around that space. What do transitions look like? Use of lockers. So you can begin to think about how many components of a normal school day in our facilities we need to begin to adapt to observe social distancing. Transportation is another big deal. How do we transport kids? We know that many kids depend on transportation. So how do we do that safely, keeping social distancing, protective gear? So we're thinking about options around that. The aspect of hygiene practices and the resources for both students and staff. So do you have hand washing stations across the school, or how are we doing the constant treatment of surfaces, almost like in front of the kids and behind the kids, so that those high touch areas remain clean, etc. Protective gear and what is going to be needed and necessary depend on how do we design all this dynamic is something that we're actively thinking about. Our team also, it's an area that we're investing a lot of energy on. How are we going to support our team so they stay healthy and protected on throughout this dynamics, providing them with equipment, the training, mechanisms to take care of the ones that are most vulnerable to exposure, monitoring the health conditions for adults and kids in the building, and having effective emergency plans for potential outbreaks. And so what immediate actions do you take to continue to keep the community safe? So that's just to name, a few of the number of things that we're actively working to prepare for something that would allow us to make sure that we have a successful start of school next year.
Yeah, I think that, I see a lot of things on social media, and I think there was a big reaction to some of the guidance that came out of from the CDC, some of the newer guidance, and people feel understandably overwhelmed. And then, but then I think that, there's so much more even that people aren't thinking about, because it really is complex. And I'm just so grateful to have you on our team and to have you leading that. One of the things that I've found really helpful, and I know you participate in a lot of these kind of calls and work groups and so forth as well, is just looking at what other districts are doing. And we've looked around the world and around the country and are talking with folks as they put their plans together. I was just on a call earlier this morning with the Council of Great City Schools, and it's helpful because you hear things that you're like, oh yeah, that's kind of what we were thinking too. And then other times people are planning things that we've thought about but have decided we're probably not going to do. What are some of the things that you're hearing that you think are good ideas that we're keeping on our list of possible or likely plans?
Yeah, yeah. As you mentioned, I have been, and even as recent as last night, I was in a call with other chief operations officers from districts across the country, sharing ideas and the way that we're thinking about this. I would say that there is clearly some what I would call like immediate pain points that we're trying to figure out how do we get solutions in place. As I mentioned earlier, transportation is one that has surfaced for many other districts. And how do we transport kids safely, knowing that it's really challenging to fit, preserving social distancing kids in a bus, without having to triple or quadruple your bus fleet, and something that really becomes unaffordable for any school district in the country.
And just to make sure people understand, so we spend about $10 million every year on busing. So if you double or triple or quadruple that, that's pretty easy math, and that's a lot.
Exactly. Yes, we run 144 routes across 3 tiers every day, and tripling or quadrupling that. To your point, it's unaffordable. It's multiples of 10 million. Some of the ideas that I think are really encouraging that some districts are beginning to work on is thinking about how do we partner with the community, to figure out where families are in a position to really transport their kids to school, so that it allows us as a district to focus on those families for whom they don't have other options. Then we're essentially reducing the volume of kids that we do transport successfully and safely every day. And also that combined with what are the ways that we can leverage our city public transportation system for older kids to also, sort of get kids to school in a safe way, and while preserving sort of the practices that we would want to see in a bus. So that's something that folks are doing some work and coming up with some ideas of how to do that effectively, and thinking about the routes, or maybe more than one cycle. And then I think that there is this a lot of conversation around how do you, in order to manage social distancing and all the practices that I was referencing earlier, how do you reduce the volume of kids that you have at once in the building? So many districts are thinking and sharing ideas of, well, do we have schedules that alternate kids going to school physically, and then maybe half of them are engaged in distant learning during that day, so you have a rotating schedule that, obviously the reality for different cities and districts is something that has to be explored, and what works and what doesn't, but utilizing that as a way, strengthening your social distance practices, so the kids are having a really strong, effective instructional experience, and being able to combine that with them being at school, is something that is being explored and talked about quite a bit.
I think the main thing that I want to make sure people know is that we want to be back, and we want to be back in our regular schedule. We want our kids back all day, every day, and yes. And we will do whatever we can to get our kids back in school. And so if people are hearing this, I want them to know that we're planning for what we need to be planned for, to be over prepared. And the director of the CDC says we need to be aggressively over prepared, and that's what we're focused on doing. And so we'll have the ability to toggle between different plans if it's a little better than we thought or a little worse than we thought, and we're going to take our cues from the public health leaders here in Tulsa, Dr. Dart and his team at the state level and at the federal level. What's the main thing that you want to make sure that anybody concerned about these topics knows about how we're planning for next year?
I one, I want to reiterate what you just said, because I think it's really, really important that the part of the complexity of all the things that we're considering is because we are planning and wanting to have kids in school, every day, all day, as much as possible, to your point. So that essentially thinking about how can we accomplish that while keeping everyone safe is what, we're wrestling with and spend a lot of energy on. I think I want also make sure that families understand that we're doing this in strong partnership with the the input from experts like the Tulsa Health Department, obviously observing and processing the guidance from the CDC. And we have a pretty experienced and very strong team
Yeah.
that is, diving into this and make sure that we're sourcing expertise and trying to figure out all possible options that we can leverage. As you mentioned earlier, consulting with folks across the country for possible ideas of better ways to do that. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. There's something that works really well. We know that things are going to have to look different, if anything, just to make sure that our students and staff are safe. But we're working to make sure that doesn't get in the way to have a strong learning experience for our kiddos.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you coming on. I think that, our thinking about next year is intense, but I want Tulsans to know that we're on it. We have a great team. We truly do. And, from what I've seen when, we're both on these national calls, I mean, people are looking to us as far as our thinking and our planning, and we're learning from them too, but we're absolutely a leader in this work nationally. And I say that I just want people to know that we really do have that stellar team that you are describing, Jorge. And our first priority is keeping everyone safe. And we know everybody wants to be back in school, and that's what we want to. The better job we do now of social distancing and wearing our masks and washing our hands and doing the right things to keep the spread down, the more likely it is that we'll be able to be back in school. And that's a little reminder I keep wanting to share with folks. So we'll keep these updates for our families and our teams, and do another one again soon.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely. Appreciate you. So thanks again, everybody, for watching this video, and let me know if you have any feedback about either this format or the topic that we covered today with Jorge, or if there are topics that you want to make sure that we touch on for next time. All right. Thank you.